Hello everyone and welcome to the channel hosted by the scariest cat on YouTube, Ben Plays Games. Now I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm an absolute wimp in real life and will do anything to avoid any kind of confrontation. Except when it comes to a video game punch up, in which case sign me up and I'll be there with bells on. I'm guessing there's plenty of you out there who are similar, and if so, Streets of Rage 4, the first game released in the series since the 90s, could be the perfect game for you. So has it been worth the 27-year wait since number 3 released in 1994, or has the game failed to deliver under the weight of expectations? Let's find out. They say violence doesn't solve anything, but that ain't true in Streets of Rage. If you played any of the prior games in the series, or titles including Golden Axe, Final Fight and Double Dragon, then you'll know that violence absolutely does solve everything, and you'll feel right at home solving things with violence in this 4th entry in the series. Developed by newcomers Lizard Cube, Guard Crush Games and Dotemu, I don't know, as a joint collaboration, this is a new game in the series where everyone knows exactly what to expect. You're going to be walking from left to right the whole time, punching literally everything that appears on screen. Is there an enemy getting in your way? Punch them. Croissant hidden in a box? Punch it. Pool table breaking up the arena too much? Definitely punch it. Right, so I haven't exactly kicked off this review by making Streets of Rage 4 sound like a particularly nuanced affair, but as you get to grips with it, you'll find out there's a shed load of different ways to punch things until they go away, and plenty of moves available to keep things feeling fresh for the full 2 to 3 hour runtime. And that's the most important thing this game has to get right, because if it's no fun beating the living daylights out of people for a few hours, then this game hasn't got a whole lot else going for it. But it is great fun, so I say crack on. And while there are definitely less fun ways to get through the game, e.g. playing on easy and just hammering the punch button over and over again, you'd be missing out on a lot, and I'm glad to say Streets of Rage 4 is so much more than just that tedious button mashing. You've got your basic offensive options, which are your bread and butter. Tap attack in the direction of your choosing to chain punches together, or hold it down for a more powerful attack. Or why not walk or jump into an enemy without hitting anything else to grab them and then continue punching? Maybe even chuck in a throw or two for good measure. If only using those doesn't do the trick, which it won't once you progress a little into the story, then it's fortunate there are a number of other ways to keep gangs at bay too, and this creates a great mix of accessibility for those new to the series and depth for old hands or fists. Perhaps the most useful tool at your disposal if you need something a little punchier are special moves. These take a percentage of your health away when used and come in offensive, defensive and flying through the air like a fisty whirlwind varieties. They're a brilliant risk-reward option, allowing you to regain lost health shown in green on your health bar by rushing back into the fray and doing enough damage to refill it, which ultimately means the added damage to your attacks cost you nothing. But you'll have to stay alert, as take one hit and you lose the option to regain any of that health entirely. It's reminiscent of Bloodborne's rally system and it works extremely well, although I must say running back into the fray against enemies with names like the Blood-Starved Beast definitely feels riskier than rushing forwards to punch a man in a vest in the face over and over again. It takes some getting used to and you'll need to figure out when's best to use them, but it's a great addition to the series and adds another layer to the combat that helps this feel like it's moved on from its heyday in the early to mid 90s when it had its own special bar that you had to build up. Weapons also make a return and the game's chock-a-block with those as well. You can use everything from knives to katanas, although come to think of it, a katana is a large knife and that doesn't illustrate my point well, so I'll try it again. You can use everything from broken bottles to motorcycle parts to whack people, and if an enemy is too far away for a good whacking, then you can throw things at them to whack them from afar instead. And Ben, what if a weapon is mid-air? I hear you maybe ask. Well, you're covered there too. You can catch weapons in flight and then continue to whack away to your heart's content. They all operate with the same basic moveset, but there's enough variety that you never get bored of using a mace to nobble a group of baddies, and they break after a few hits, which encourages experimentation. At times, you also gain access to different types of grenades, which are great fun to use, but I tended to steer clear of those as it's very easy to end up creating an obstacle for yourself rather than damaging a set of enemies. There is nothing more annoying than throwing a grenade and then standing on it yourself. Maybe I'm just an idiot for letting that happen, maybe I am an idiot, but it did annoy me at times. Last but not least, there are also super attacks, denoted by a star under your health bar. These do a decent chunk of damage to enemies, but are pickups and they're always a little bit thin on the ground for my liking. I'd usually end up saving them to take a good chunk out of each level's boss at the end, but I wish they were more frequent so I felt a little more comfortable using them mid-level, as they look superb and each character has their own individual move. And once you've settled into the rhythm of the combat, using a weapon to take down a nearby thug, then chaining a combo together before finally throwing an obese fella into the air, you'll also gain a better understanding of which of the game's characters suits your playstyle. If you prefer to be more mobile, Cherry, who relies on speed as she zips around the arena, may be more in your wheelhouse. Or perhaps you'd rather be slow and lumbering but more powerful. In that case, a character like Axel will probably better float your boat. And if one of them isn't working, there's no need to stick to them either, with the option to change presented at the end of every level or after every game over, and with more new protagonists unlocking as you make your way through the game. Personally, I spent most of my time playing as Cherry. I mean, come on, she smacks people with a guitar, but there's definitely a character in there for everyone. And now with the perfect character picked and your moves practiced, you have to use everything in your arsenal to take down the staggering number of enemies you'll face throughout the game. Easier enemies tend to just walk around and can be dealt with a simple combo, but most require you to be more aware of your positioning as they charge at you or try to deliver a dropkick, while some even have special requirements you need to meet to even get a hit in. Riot Police, for example, need to have their shields broken before you can do any damage, while these dudes are much easier to take down if you give them a hug, and then maybe a few goodbye punches as well. Enemy variety starts out on the low side for the first level or two, as you find yourself mainly dealing with grunts who take little more than a few punches to be rid of, but it quickly ramps up, and by the halfway point you'll be dodging charging enemies while someone else tries to assault you with a pull cue, while you're desperately also trying to get that salad pick up to top your health back up to max. It's frantic, it's fun, and it really gets you thinking about your positioning and the order to take enemies down in. And it will quickly make you also realise that this game's not just about hitting things, but also thinking through what order you'll hit them in, and how exactly you'll hit them. However, it can frustrate occasionally, as it's sometimes difficult to judge whether you're on the same plane as an enemy to make contact, but it happens infrequently and it's never really that much of an issue. Finally, once you get to the end of every level, you'll face off against a boss. These are pretty fun on the whole and they have a unique gimmick or two, but the difficulty does seem to be a little bit up and down, with some bosses later in the game easier than those you've already vanquished. It also does fall into the 2 for the price of 1 trap every now and then, with some bosses simply adding a second boss you faced earlier in the game, or even additional grunt enemies to make things trickier. It's hardly the end of the world, but I'd much rather the actual boss had more health and hit a bit harder and things stayed as a one-on-one brawl. You know what they say, too many thugs spoil the broth, and I'd much rather concentrate fully on taking down that unique enemy, rather than dealing with the frustration of trying to take down that unique enemy while also being punched in the back by regular thugs I dispatch with ease at any other moment. I've spent a lot of time talking about the combat, but to summarise, it has a real weight behind it and it's an absolute joy to play. With everything I've just talked about, there's enough variety included to keep it fresh for the full running time, but I would add the caveat that if you're someone who hasn't enjoyed these games in the past, this isn't going to be the one that changes your mind. It's more of a small step than a giant leap for the genre, and I wouldn't call that a negative either, as it was never marketed as anything else. Outside of the combat itself, encounters are also excellently designed and help keep the core gameplay loop interesting, as punching things becomes a little bit more familiar after the first couple of levels. Pipes shoot out nasty looking steam, packs of enemies ambush you while others throw grenades from above, you fight it out in a dojo full of swords, and there's even the chance to have some fun with a group of fat men and a wrecking ball. It's lovely encounter design, and the game keeps mixing things up even as you race towards the conclusion. One minor annoyance: sometimes the levels scroll before you've had the chance to pick up an item you wanted, which can be frustrating at times. I know this is part and parcel of the genre and hardly anything new, but a little more leeway certainly wouldn't have gone amiss, especially since this is a problem that existed in the old games and could have been solved. I wish I could continue on and say that presentation is entirely lovely across the game too, but in my opinion it's a bit of a mixed bag. The default graphics are certainly lovely, the 12 levels, which take you across slums, bars and sewers to name but a few, look great as well, and animations as your character smashes its way through wave after wave of baddies are excellent. Backdrop wise, the various locations you fight in all the way through are spot on as well, with backgrounds teeming with little details. Two particular favourites of mine are this man in the baths who's clearly wrestling with the hangover of a lifetime, and this secretary cowering behind her desk after things kicked off in an art gallery. But as good as the game looks visually, in my opinion the more cartoony look is a little too clean for the grimy late 80s, early 90s aesthetic that 4's predecessors used. Now don't get me wrong, this cartoony look is fantastic and it's been executed consistently brilliantly throughout the game, but it's like using Monet in a child's picture book. I appreciate it, but I'm not sure the aesthetic entirely matches what the game's going for thematically. And this cartoon style is also extended to the comic book panels used for exposition in between levels, and they're done really well too. The plot, granted, is fairly nonsensical for someone like myself who couldn't remember a lick of what happened in the older games, but it matches the look and feel of the rest of the game perfectly and will definitely keep you entertained. It's centres around the mysterious Y siblings, children of Three's Mr. X, who have left the sprawling metropolis the game takes place in under threat once again, with it down to favourites Axel, Blaze and a host of characters old and new to clean up the mess. I won't go into any more details to avoid spoiling it for those who do want to experience the rest of the story, but I do want to have a tiny whinge about the end of the game. It does not end well. I would not call it satisfying and it's abrupt to say the least. I don't want to bandy the word jarring about, but I would absolutely call it jarring. What I did think was brilliant on the presentation side of things is the music. It peaks and dips at just the right times during the levels and remains fantastic throughout the entire game. You really need to hear it for yourself, but hats off to famed Streets of Rage composer Yuzo Koshiro and Oliver de Riviere and the rest of the team for doing a stand-up job. There's splashes of techno, hints of jungle and plenty of synth in the soundtrack, and that makes this game a joy to listen to. And that extends to the sound effects too, which fit right in and really add to the kinetic feel the game has as you bounce between enemies delivering knockout blows. And no need to worry if you're more of a connoisseur, you can also swap the new tunes out for a soundtrack chock full of tracks from the original series. And if you're one of those connoisseurs who revelled in the 8 and 16-bit scoring systems, you're also catered for here too, with a combo scoring system on offer giving those with a more competitive streak the chance to climb the leaderboards. Collecting those points also helps you unlock extras including retro versions of your favourite characters, which is a lovely touch, and they even come with their old animations and sound effects to boot. It's really nice, and with the game looking so different from its predecessors, it's a great nod to the series' roots. There are some additional modes to unlock as well, including boss rush and an arcade, and you can play the game online with another player, or you can have couch co-op, sit down and play it with 3 friends all the way through. So, the big question then, would I recommend this game to everyone? Yes and no. It's fantastic fun, but it's brief. So if you love this type of game, you're probably going to be more than happy. But if you want to try one like this for the first time, you might be left feeling shortchanged by the time you hit the credits. But for those of us who do love the series, this is the game you've been waiting for, and it does not disappoint. Trust me, if you do decide to pick this game up, you're going to have an absolute ball. Thank you everyone for taking the time to watch this review. I hope you enjoyed it, and please go out and give the game a try. If you did enjoy it, please like and subscribe and maybe leave a comment below, and I'll see you all soon for the next video.